I could see where people might call me the haunted carpenter or the paranormal carpenter. I've now seen apparitions, shadow figures, objects moving, and I've heard disembodied voices and ghostly footsteps. It was getting to the point that I never knew what could happen when I walked into a house. Hello and welcome to the show. This is Our Family's True Tales of the Supernatural. This is the show where I'll be talking about paranormal activity I've witnessed. A lot of the paranormal activity that I've seen has been in houses I've renovated. As always, please remember to like and subscribe to help us out. Comment if you subscribed. I'll reply to welcome new subscribers. Also, let us know what you liked about the show. So now, let's get on with the show. One day, when I was working at a house with a coworker named Ed, I can say that we both noticed disembodied voices. It seemed like Ed would notice these voices every time I went to the hardware store to buy things to install. He would always hear unexplained strange noises as well. Ed was a slim African American man who was slim and stood with a short to medium height. As Ed spoke of hearing strange noises, I also started to remember hearing strange noises as well. Some of the unexplained noises we heard were disembodied voices, footsteps, and small things getting dropped. We would never quite figure out what the voices were saying. It always sounded like they were mumbling. One day, Ed was in the attic, making sure the wires were in good condition and hooked up so everything would work well. He yelled down to me to ask what I was saying, and I told him that I hadn't been saying anything. He said he heard what sounded like someone talking to him. I told him there wasn't anyone else in the house. I went and looked outside, and I didn't see anyone outside the house either. We also heard sounds like it was as if someone dropped a screw or a nail. It seemed like it would only make one small click on the floor, like tick. Yet it happened now and then, and it happened when no one would be doing anything or holding any nails or screws. We never could figure out an explanation for the noises or how the noises kept occurring. Sometimes Ed and I would be in the house and we would hear footsteps. It sounded like someone was walking through the house. One time, Ed and I were standing next to each other discussing how to fix something. We both heard the main side entrance door open and footsteps, as if someone walked in with heavy work boots. I didn't think anyone else was supposed to be there that day, so I went to see who it was. I got to the side door and found it closed, and there wasn't anybody in any of the back rooms when I went to look. I looked all around and couldn't find anyone. I told Ed that I didn't see anyone there. We both agreed that we heard the door open and someone walking in heavy work boots. Yet we couldn't find anybody. A short time later, I was standing in the hallway near the center of the house, and the side door opened by itself. The hallway was T-shaped with the main part going from the front to the back of the house. The other short section of the hall went off to the right side of the house to the main side entrance. I was in the intersection of the hallway as the door opened all by itself, and I heard footsteps. It was as if someone was coming in with heavy work boots. The problem was that I was looking in that direction, but I didn't see anyone. The footsteps sounded like they were coming right toward me. I leaned back to the wall behind me. The footsteps then continued moving toward me and seemed to walk right up to where I was standing. Yet the footsteps seemed to then turn and head toward the front door of the house. The footsteps continued with several steps until it seemed to get to the front door. The footstep sound then seemed to stop. I stood there stunned, looking at the situation and wondering how this could happen. I was beginning to see that it was clear that there was some paranormal activity here. On another occasion, when we were working in the house in summertime, we had strange things happen with a fan. As I walked through the house, I walked past the fan while it was on, but I made sure not to touch it or make it fall over. Yet as I walked past the fan, it fell over anyway. I picked it up again and put it next to the corner of the wall of the hallway so it wouldn't fall over. A few minutes later, I walked to that spot and the fan fell over again without me touching it. I then picked it up again and leaned it against the corner of the wall to make sure it couldn't fall over again. The fan didn't seem to vibrate or shake when it was turned on, so I couldn't figure out why it kept falling over. A few minutes later, I walked to that part of the house and stood near the fan and looked at it without touching it. As I was about to go get some tools, the fan fell over again, even though I didn't touch it. A few minutes later, as Ed and I were standing in the hallway talking about fixing some things, it fell over again. This time, both of us were there and noticed that no one was next to the fan. Neither one of us could explain why it kept falling over. Both of us also knew that neither one of us had touched it. As Ed walked away to do some work, I put the fan in a bedroom doorway and closed the door on it to hold it into place. A few minutes later, I heard a loud bang that sounded like the fan fell again. I was concerned, but this time another coworker named Ricky said he tripped over the cord, and that explained what happened that time. I can't explain why it just kept falling over again and again like that. Another day when we were working on the house, some tools kept getting pushed to the floor with no visible cause. As I walked by, I would pick up the tools. Since there was a 5-gallon bucket there next to it, with a small piece of plywood on top of it, I put them on top of the plywood. A few minutes later, I heard the tools hit the floor again. I thought my coworker Ed pushed them on the floor. I was going to tell him to take it easy on the floor, but I noticed he wasn't near the tools. I asked him what the noise was, and he said the tools must have fell on the floor. I went to work on something, and I heard the tools fall on the floor again. I stepped around the corner to see if Ed had walked by or pushed the tools over onto the floor somehow. I saw Ed laying on the floor in front of the bathroom sink installing a sink drain pipe. He wasn't close to the tools, and since he was laying on the floor, he couldn't have pushed them over and suddenly fallen on the floor. I was determined to set the tools in the middle of the plywood this time and properly balance them in the middle of the bucket so they wouldn't fall again. I put the tools in the middle of the plywood and balanced them. I walked away a few paces and heard them hit the floor again. I looked back and saw no one there. I went to that spot and saw Ed still laying on the floor working on the sink drain pipe. I suspected it was ghostly activity again. So this time, I pushed the tools and the bucket to the side of the hallway floor so no one would trip over them. I then walked away and hoped I wouldn't hear them bang against the floor again. That seemed to have taken care of the problem, but I still couldn't figure out how they kept falling with no visible person there. I could only consider that there was some ghostly activity at play. A short time later, I was counting all the electrical outlets and light switches in the house. I needed to know how many cover plates I would need to buy at the hardware store. I started counting at the back of the house and made my way to the front of the house. I got to the front room of the house at the main big bedroom and saw my coworker, Ed. As I walked into the room where Ed was standing, he asked me what I said to him a couple minutes before that time. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about because I was counting electrical outlets in the back of the house. He then told me that there was somebody that looked like me and mumbled something to him. I assured him that it wasn't me. I also told him that I had been doing other things at the back end of the house for the last several minutes. He then told me it must have been a ghost that looked like me. I then realized that it must have been a doppelganger ghost. I remember hearing some paranormal experts talk about it a short time before then. They mentioned that there was a legend that if a person sees their own doppelganger, it's a bad omen. It means that the person will die soon or bad things will happen to that person. I think the expert also said that if you see another person's doppelganger, it means that either bad things will happen or the spirit is evil or the spirit is playing tricks on people. I wasn't sure which it might be, but I was getting a long list of paranormal events that happened in that house. I never knew from one day to the next what would happen in that house. Sometime later, I had another incident when I was installing a doorknob on a coat closet door. As I installed the doorknob, I saw something out of the corner of my eye that looked like a person in the hallway. The person looked like a guy with dark pants and either a dark shirt or dark colored suit. The guy looked like he had a slim to medium build and was short to medium height. They also had dark hair with very pale skin. I first thought it was one of my coworkers looking around for some tools. Then it looked like the person was looking up at the ceiling and all around the hallway. They then turned and peeked into the open doorway at the big front bedroom. The person then seemed to look at the living room where I was working on the coat closet doorknob. I then suspected that it might be someone who might be thinking of buying the house. As the person walked near to the center of the room, I wanted to stand up to talk to the person. I also wanted to help them look around the house. I stood up, and as I stood up, I tilted my head down to the floor for a fraction of a second as I rose to a standing position. As I stood up, I looked forward and couldn't see anyone else in the room. I looked all around the room, but didn't see anyone there. There was a cabinet in the center of the room that we planned to install in the kitchen at a later time. I thought one of my coworkers might have been over to pick up some tools and I couldn't see them. So I walked to the middle of the room to look over the top of the cabinet that was sitting on the floor. As I looked over the cabinet, I couldn't see anyone. I wondered who it was that I saw, or if they were a living person or a ghostly apparition. I started to get an eerie feeling, and I moved back into the hallway. I saw my coworkers coming up the hallway, and I asked them if they saw anyone walk through the house. I told them I saw a guy walk up the hallway into the living room, but when I went to talk to them, they disappeared. I told them how I thought I saw the guy walk in the middle of the room, and as I stood up to talk, they disappeared. There were two coworkers with me that day, one with a turquoise t-shirt and one with a white t-shirt. Yet the guy I saw wore either a dark shirt or a dark suit, so it couldn't have been one of them. The guy I saw wore either a dark shirt or a dark suit, so it couldn't have been one of my coworkers. This left me feeling a bit bewildered and dismayed. I was thinking more and more that there were paranormal events occurring in this house. I hoped nothing would follow me home and disrupt my life at my own house. So I said a few prayers over that house and even told the spirits to go into the light to their eternal reward. I was surprised that my prayers seemed to work. I didn't notice any problems after that. We later had difficulty selling the house, so we rented it to a family. But one day, they left without notifying us. We wondered what happened and why we couldn't get them on the phone for a week or two. My dad finally got them on the phone, and the only thing they said was that they couldn't live there anymore. I wasn't sure if that meant that the paranormal activity started again or if there was a maintenance issue. I never got a clear answer on that question. We let another family move in, and they mentioned a small leak, and we used some sealant to stop the leak and didn't notice any problems after that. So I still couldn't tell if that other family left because of paranormal activity or if it was just that minor leak. At this point in my life, I had seen a lot of paranormal activity. I could see where people might call me the haunted carpenter or the paranormal carpenter. I've now seen apparitions, shadow figures, objects moving, and I've heard disembodied voices and ghostly footsteps. It was getting to the point that I never knew what could happen when I walked into a house. Another interesting thing is that a short time after this, I talked to one of the neighbors, and they gave me a description of the guy that used to live there. The description they gave matched the guy in the dark suit that I saw walk into the living room. I don't know if that meant that he was dead and appeared as a ghost, or if it was the doppelganger playing tricks again, making itself look like other people. I couldn't tell you one way or the other because I have no idea. Well, needless to say, I survived to tell the tale, and that's the end of this tale of the things that happened at this house. I can also tell you that all the names have been changed in this story to protect people's privacy. So that's all for this episode. See you next time.